Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada,
Jaya Prabhupada,
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Koda Nitai, Maya Poshati, Koda Nitai, Maya Poshati,
Jaya Nitai, Maya Poshati,
Koda Nitai, Jaya Maya Poshati. Let's come with the Srila Prabhupada, Shishi Koda Nitai, Maya Poshati.
So I'll just read from Prabhupada Lilamrita while we're finding it. What's the day today? What's the day today? Shamananda's appearance? Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So a very powerful start to the Lilamrita. But sex is a very strong force, Mr. Goldsmith challenged. What a man feels for a woman is undeniable. Therefore, in every culture there is institution of marriage, Prabhupada replied. You can get yourself married and live peacefully with one woman, But the wife should not be used as a machine for sense gratification. Sex should be restricted to once a month and only for the propagation of children. Hayagriva, who was seated just to Swamiji's left, beside the large dangling symbol, spoke out suddenly, "Only once a month," and with a touch of facetious humor, he added loudly, "Better to forget the whole thing." "Yes, that's it. Very good boy." Swamiji laughed, and others joined him. It's best not to think of it. Best just to chant Hare Krishna. And he held up his hands as if he were chanting on a strand of beans. That way we'll be saved from so much botheration. Sex is like the itching sensation, that's all. And as when we scratch, it gets worse. So we should tolerate the itching and ask Krishna to help us. It is not easy. Sex is the highest pleasure in the material world, and it is also the greatest bondage. But Steve Goldsmith was shaking his head. Swamiji looked at him smiling. There is still a problem? It's just that, well, it's been proven dangerous to repress the sex drive. There's a theory that we have wars because people are eating meat, Prabhupada interrupted. As long as people eat meat, there will be war. And if a man eats meat, he will be sure to have illicit sex also. Steve Goldsmith was an influential friend and supporter of ISKCON, but Prabhupada would not change the philosophy of Krishna consciousness to please the Americans. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So today is the disappearance day of Sri Shyamananda Pandit. Feeling very sad, Dukhi, over losing several children before his birth, his parents named him Dukhi Krishna Das. When taking Diksha from Hridaya Chaitanya, he became known as Krishna Das. In Vrindavan, he joined Narottam Das Thakur and Srinivasacharya to study the Goswami books under Sri Jiva Goswami. While living in Vrindavan, Krishna Das regularly swept the streets before dawn. He performed this humble service so that the Vaishnavas would not hurt their feet while walking to the temples. One morning, he found a captivatingly beautiful golden ankle bell. When Lalita and Vishaka Shakis asked for the ankle bells, Krishna Das said he would only give it to the original owner. Blindfolding Krishna Das, the gopis brought him to Srimati Radhika. She allowed him to put the bells on their ankle, but before fashioning it, Krishna Das reverentially touched it to his forehead. This left a new tilak mark, which now distinguishes all of Shyamananda's followers. Rejoicing over Krishna Das's transcendental fortune, Sri Jiva Goswami awarded him the name Shyamananda, one who pleases Srimati Radharani, or servant of Shyamasundar Krishna. Sometime after Hridaya Chaitanya's disappearance, he reappeared in a dream telling Shyamananda to preach. With the help of his foremost disciple Rasikananda, Shyamananda profusely spread the worship and service of Gaur Nityananda all over Orissa. Shyamananda Pandit Prabhu ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 3, entitled Yamaraj Instructs His Messengers, and it's text 28. Tan anayadvam asato vimukan mukunda tanayadvam asato vimukan mukunda padara vinda makaranda rasad ajasram padara vinda makaranda rasad ajasram Niskinchanai Paramahamsa Kulia Asangya Niskinchanai Paramahamsa Kulia Asanga Jushtad Grihe Niraya Vatmani Bada Trishnan Justad Grihe Niraya Vatmani Bada Trishnan Tanna dayadvam asato vimukam mukunda. Padaravinda makaranda rasada jasram. Niskinchanai paramahamsa kolera sangya. Justad grihena naraya vatmani bada trishnan. Tanaya dadvam asato vimukan mukunda. Padaravinda makaranda rasada jasram. Niskanchanai paramahamsa kolera sangya. Justad grihena naraya vatmani bada trishnan. Nadatana satato vikama mukunda. Padaravinda makaranda rasada jasram. Niskinchanai paramahamsa kolera sangai. Justad grihena naraya vatmani bada trishnan. Tanaya dadva masato vimukan mukanda. Padaravinda makaranda rasada jasram. Janai paramahamsa kolera sangai. Justad grihena naraya vatmani bada trishnan. Tadana yadva masato mukunda mukunda. Niskinchanai paramahamsa kolera sangha. Justad grihena naraya vatmani bada trishnan. Ladies. Tadana yadva masato mukan mukunda. Niskinchanai paramahamsa kolera sangha. Justad grihena naraya vatmani bada trishnan. Tan them anayadvam bring before me asata non-devotees, those who have not taken to Krishna consciousness, vimukan who have turned against, mukunda of Mukunda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, padaravinda of the lotus feet, makaranda of the honey, rasat the taste, ajasram continuously, nikinchanai by persons completely free from material attachment. Paramahamsa Kulai, by the Paramahamsas, the most exalted personalities. Asangai, who have no material attachment. Justat, which is enjoyed. Grihe, to household life. Naraya Vatmani, the path leading to hell. Badatrishnan, whose desires are bound. Translation: Paramahamsas are exalted persons who have no taste for material enjoyment and who drink the honey of the Lord's lotus feet. My dear servants, bring to me for punishment only persons who are averse to the taste of that honey, who do not associate with Paramahamsas, and who are attached to family life and worldly enjoyment, which form the path to hell. Responsibly, please. Paramahamsas are exalted persons who have no taste for material enjoyment and who drink the honey of the Lord's lotus feet. My dear servants, bring to me for punishment only persons who are averse to the taste of that honey, who do not associate with Paramahamsas, and who are attached to family life and worldly enjoyment, which form the path to hell. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. After warning the Yamadutas not to approach the devotees, Yamaraj now indicates who is to be brought before him. He specifically advises the Yamadutas to bring him the materialistic persons who are attached to household life merely for sex. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Yan Maitunani Grihamede Sukham Hitukcham. People are attached to household life for sex only. They're always harassed in many ways by their material engagements, and their only happiness is that after working very hard all day, at night they sleep and indulge in sex. Nidraya riyate naktam vayayavena chavavaya. At night, materialistic householders sleep or indulge in sex life. Diva chateyaya rajan kutamba babarana va. During the day, they are busy trying to find out where money is, and after they get money, they spend it to maintain their families. Yamaraj specifically advises his servants to bring these persons to him for punishment and not to bring the devotees who always lick the honey at the lotus feet of the Lord, who are equal to everyone and who try to preach Krishna consciousness because of sympathy for all living entities. Devotees are not liable to punishment by Yamaraj, but persons who have no information of Krishna consciousness cannot be protected by their material life of so-called family enjoyment. Srimad Bhagavatam says, Deha pacha kalatri deshu atmashain sainyeshavastu api tesham pramato nidanam pajyan api na pashyate. Such persons completely believe that their nations, communities, or families can protect them, unaware that all such fallible soldiers will be destroyed in due course of time. In conclusion, one should try to associate with persons who engage in devotional service 24 hours a day. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swabadanti Tam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhyevacha Paditanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So echoing the Leelamrita, Srila Prabhupada was making the point there. The point comes up again. So it's so it's kind of heavy. It was heavy for Mr. Goldsmith. When you're attached, it's heavy. The more attached you are, the heavier it is. The less attached, then the easier it is. So that's the problem with attachment. Attachment is the if you break attachment down, it's composed of three things. Srila Prabhupada explains, and one of the purports in the Bhagavatam. If you wanted to find out what are the ingredients to make up material attachment, Srila Prabhupada explains negligence of practicing spiritual rules and regulations, the conception of void that underlies the frustration of life, and a fear of a personal identity. That makes up. You get those three ingredients, you mix them in a bowl, and then you can pour it into a bottle and call it material attachment. That's what it is. And then if you want to break it down, then you split those three ingredients up and you follow the rules and regulations. You become free from this conception of void, and you become free from being averse to having personal relationships. So international society is especially to nurture living interactions. Kadamba Swami gave a wonderful talk the other day, and he was saying he's just tried to be kind. He's asking his disciples to change. He says, I ask you to please change. He said, I know it is very, very hard, but please change. So it's very hard to change. It's even harder to get someone else to change. But you've got a much better chance of getting someone else to change if you can change yourself. The things you see change when the way you see things change. And that's what they say. If you want to change the way you are, you have to change the way you see things. So that's attachment. That's what attachment is. And the ultimate attachment is to material pleasure. And the ultimate material pleasure is this sexual pleasure. And so Yamaraj is, if it wasn't made already clear enough, I mean, it looked like it was quite clear to them already, because that's why they were chasing Yamaraj, because that's what he'd been doing. So anyway, he's drawing a line now that if not just Paramahamsas, but also those who associate with Paramahamsas. So that's interesting as well, that one may not be directly a fully initiated devotee, but he may be associating with devotees. Otherwise, those who are attached to material things, they form the path to hell. So you could think, well, that's quite heavy, really, because we don't, you're asking me to believe that. I don't know whether I do, but and then you're trying to scare me into it by talking about hell. I'm feeling a little bit intimidated by all this, But you don't have to wait until the person dies to see whether these things turn your life into hell. You can look at people that are already deeply engrossed in material life, and you can see that that's what it's doing. When we were driving up, actually, on the marathon, don't know if you remember, we were coming up past Dundee, and there was a window that was broken on a veranda to these high-rise flats. And on the veranda was various items of furniture. So there'd obviously been a domestic feud, and half the furniture had gone through initially through the window, and then later on through the hole in the wall. So there'd obviously been some kind of breakdown. So when people are contained in a small space like that, then it can become very difficult. And attachment causes that. So the devotee may be in a situation where he has a lot of responsibilities and he has a lot of things to look after. He may be a grihastha, he may have a family, but he sees everything as the property of Krishna. So he sees the children as devotees of Krishna and his wife as a servant of Krishna. And so he thinks, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains in one of his songs, let me just try to serve these personalities that Krishna has given me to look after, and let me maintain everything as to look after everything, but not to consider myself the proprietor. So in that way, one can be in material life and family life, but in a very detached way. And he's remembering Krishna all the time, actually. That's part of the process, is Shravanam and Kirtanam. And when you're doing Shravanam and Kirtanam, you have to be practicing Smaranam. Sometimes the last thing on your mind when you're chanting is Krishna. So that's the challenge. Can you remember Krishna? Because remembering Krishna means you have to be attached to Krishna. And it's not possible to be attached if we're impure. Because if you take a sticky tape and you drag it across the ground, it doesn't stick to anything because it's impure. And so when your consciousness is pure and you stick it on Krishna, it stays on Krishna. And then you remember Krishna all day. So it's important when you're chanting that you're also keeping a track of whether you're remembering Krishna, because you could be doing anything when you're chanting. You could be going through the 14 planetary systems and counting all the socks that need to have the whole sewed in them today. And so many weird and wonderful things that you can be thinking of, but you're forgetting Krishna. So when Krishna is saying, if you become conscious of me, there's a certain point where you break through the barrier, you perceive Krishna directly, and then you don't want to give that up, you don't want to forget Krishna. And that's smaranam, when you start to remain fixed on Krishna. And if you're fixed on Krishna, once the sticky tape's on Krishna, then it doesn't go on anything else. There's nothing else to be attached to. Krishna is the summum bodhim. So once you're attached to Krishna, then automatically you're detached. Just like when you switch on the light, automatically the darkness is going. You can go around with a small torch and you can say, I've got rid of the darkness in that corner. And then you run over to the next corner, and I've got rid of the darkness in that. Oh, but the darkness has come back in that corner. So you run over back to that corner, and I've got rid of the darkness in that. In this way, you can eliminate things to some degree, but only in a patchy way. But then if you switch on the light, that's it. Everything is dissipated immediately. Krishna Surya Sama Maya Haya Andakara Yahan Krishna Dahan Nahi Maya Adhakara. Krishna is like sunshine, and Maya is like darkness. So wherever there is Krishna, there is no Maya, there is no darkness. So obviously once you switch the light on, who would want to switch the light back off? So the idea is in the morning program, the light gets switched on, and then throughout the day, you want to keep the light on all day. You want to remember Krishna all day. You don't allow your mind to wander at any time, you know. So the morning program is to solidify that attachment to Krishna, so that nothing that comes up during the day can make us forget Krishna, whatever it is. That reflection which appears to be in darkness, if we can remember that it is actually not in darkness and it's connected to Krishna, but we see it as a reflection in darkness because we forget the connection. We forget that it's Krishna. It's Krishna's energy. That's all the form, qualities, everything, all the attributes are originally coming from Krishna. Any questions or comments? Yes.
And so, how can we become more attached to Krishna?
How can we become more attached?
Yeah, I guess these three things, like the makeup of attachment, negligence and rules and regs, conception of void, and fear of personal identity, is material attachment. So how do we become spiritually attached?
By hearing the holy name. That's the main method in Kali Yuga, is to hear the holy name. Whatever faults may be there, everything is perfect if there's the chanting of Hare Krishna. And we may be aspiring to chant the holy name before we're actually chanting the holy name. So we have to understand what is chanting, what does chanting Hare Krishna mean? One time Srila Prabhupada said that Narada Muni came and he was laughing, and he was watching the devotees and they were doing a kirtan at some big festival. But there was nobody there actually. But then afterwards Srila Prabhupada said, didn't you see Narada Muni was there? And the devotee said, no, he didn't. And Prabhupada said, and they said, what was he doing? Srila Prabhupada said he was laughing to see the malechas trying to chant Hare Krishna. Now, they probably thought they were chanting Hare Krishna. You know, if you just said to them, what are you doing right now? Then they said, we're chanting Hare Krishna. What do you think we're doing, you know? But he saw it as trying to chant Hare Krishna. So until the chanting is Shuddhanam, we're trying to chant. So we're trying to get free of our attachments. We're trying to become attached to Krishna. But when you do chant, even once the holy name purely, then after that, you're stuck, you're connected. then to tear your consciousness away from that, there's no way you're going to want to give that up. And the challenge is, can you maintain your faith in how long it's going to take to get to that point where you penetrate and directly have darshan of Krishna? That's the challenge. So then obviously, the quicker I do this, the less faith I'm going to have. Of course, to do it quicker, you also have to have faith. So we gain faith by reading, actually, Srila Prabhupada's books. There's like faith just dripping off every word when you're reading the book. So you have to read the books every day. And that fills up your faith levels. And then that helps you to be more enthusiastic. And then it's just a question of waiting then and being patient. Krishna knows exactly, he's the expert judge of time and circumstance, so he knows exactly when. Sometimes we may be thinking, well, surely he should have done it by now. So then that becomes another test of faith. Because Krishna will do it just at the right moment. But we have to have faith that he's the expert judge of time and circumstance, and he knows exactly when, where, and how he's going to do that, When you break over that barrier and you go into spontaneous and everything is just natural, and there's ruchi, there's taste, You don't have to do anything anymore. You want to do everything. That's when you've come over. Obviously, the more intensely you practice Krishna consciousness, then the quicker it will happen. More seriously, the more sincerely you do it. Vikriditam Rajavadibiridam cha Vishnu. There's a nice verse in the 10th canto where it's explaining that one who faithfully hears and chants Krishna's glories, he becomes a pure devotee, attains pure devotional service, bhaktim param bhagavati, the highest pure devotional service, param. He attains that. And then pratilabhya, and then karman hridaya rogam, the disease of the heart, the lust, then it goes. Shishikodanitaya maya poshashiki jai. And so I was asking Shiv Ramash, because he was saying, you should learn this verse. It's a really good verse, And I says, well, it doesn't seem very immediate, Guru Maharaj. Hridrogam, the hridrogam, the kaman hridrogam, the disease of lust in the heart still seems to be there. And he said, well, it may seem like a long time, he said, but compared to how long you've been in the material world, it's actually it's almost instantaneous, if you look at it like that. So if you look at it like that, if a man was running, right, and he'd run 500 miles, and then just as he's getting to the end, he's got 2 feet to go. And they say, if you do this, you cross the line. So he says, well, it seems to be taking a while, these last 2 feet. But compared to the 500 miles, it's nothing, Srila Prabhupada said that. Said, don't turn your back now. Don't turn away from Krishna now. You're on the threshold of immortality. So close now. We're almost in through the door. We're just knocking on the door, actually, and begging Krishna to open the door. So if we don't hang around, sometimes when you're doing door to door, you knock the door a few times, and you're really fired up, so you think, I want to go into the next door. So you go into the next door, and then the other door opens, and then you've got 2 doors. You've got 2 open doors. You're trying to deal with them both. So you have, when you're knocking on the door, you have to be patient. You have to have faith that the person's in, and that it's just a question of time before he opens the door, And he's also wondering, is this person really, does he really want me to open the door? Yes.
Hare Krishna. I have another question. So in the translation, it describes that those who associate with Paramahamsas as well, with Vaishnavas, aren't touched by the Yamadutas. So who does take care of them at the end of their life? Or?
What was that again? Sorry.
So the people who associate with Paramahamsas, who is it that will see to them at the end when they leave their body?
Well, you've got Yamadutas, and You don't have just like mellow dutas and then Vishnu dutas. It's Yama dutas or it's Vishnu dutas. So if you're not under the jurisdiction, because practically everybody is under the jurisdiction of the Yamadutas, how many people are not attached? Even those trying to be devotees, how many of them are not attached? We're trying to not be attached. We're trying to become devotees. We're trying to actually chant. We're trying to become real devotees. So everyone should be thinking, well, I don't know whether I really am a real devotee, I can't just relax and think, I'm saved. Hallelujah, I'm okay. I can relax. Everyone should be thinking, well, I'm trying to become a devotee. I'm trying to associate nicely with Paramahamsas. I'm trying to please them. They say that that's the secret of success in Krishna consciousness, is to melt the heart of a Paramahamsa. So when you do something very, exceptional in Krishna consciousness, then the Paramahamsa's heart melts, and then you've made it. So we're works in progress, and we're aspiring, and our goal should be very clear what it is, what we want: Krishna prema, pure devotional service, everything finished in this one lifetime. That's our goal. And then once that's established, then we can start to move towards the goal.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. You were mentioning about the morning program turns on the light and we try and keep it on all day. This idea. So if you could just maybe share some, practical advice for how to fully get the most from the morning program and not just sort of go through it and get breakfast at the end, like actually, take the most from it.
How to increase our absorption in the morning program? Well, it's helpful if you know what you're singing. There's a few standard prayers that we're singing every morning. I was just thinking of this morning. I was listening to the devotee singing, and I was thinking, obviously, if you're singing and you know what it means, it will affect the way that you sing it to some degree. So, what does the Maha Mantra mean? What does Vanchakapatrubichya mean? What does Tulsi Puja mean? What does Guru Puja mean? What does Mangalati mean? These are all, especially, Tulsi Puja is very deep, what you're asking for from Srimati Vrindadevi. It's very, very esoteric. Jai Radha Madhava, we sing. When Srila Prabhupada's Godbrother's head, that Prabhupada had established that as standard before Bhagavatam, they were really surprised because it's such a confidential bhajan to sing, what it's referring to. So we can brush up on that, become more aware. The more knowledge you have, the more potency what you're doing has. And the more your intention is to please, then the more pleasing it is. It's actually not possible to do devotional service casually and unintentionally. You can't the intention has to be there to please Krishna for it to be real devotional service. So in the morning program, are we trying to please ourselves, or are we chanting to please ourselves, or are we chanting to please Krishna, to give Krishna pleasure? Well, it's funny because that's actually the most pleasure. But if you just have to be a little bit kind of calm the way you do it, because if you get too grabby about wanting your own pleasure, it blocks you getting the pleasure. But as soon as you genuinely want to just serve, you experience so much pleasure. So then, the way the mind works, let's do that again, and I can experience pleasure. And immediately then that becomes the exploitive mentality, and then that ruins the chanting, that ruins the morning program, that ruins the association of devotees. So it's like a vigilant challenge all the time. Okay, let me just actually do this. I know I'm going to experience pleasure, but that's not the reason why I want to do it. I want to do it just because. And then the pleasure immediately comes in, So that's a little tricky, but if you can get the hang of doing that, then everything becomes Actually, it's very easy, Krishna consciousness, because Krishna helps us. If our intention is genuinely to please, you see. That's the secret.
Thank you, Prabhu. How to identify a Paramahamsa?
How to identify a problem?
A Paramahamsa, how do we know who is a...
Identify a Paramahamsa. Well, you best just playing it safe if you're not sure, and just being respectful. See, Rupa Goswami says, even in your mind, you can respect people that are chanting, you know. So we're never disrespectful. It's just that we become more and more respectful. And yet it is a challenge, because you have to become like it's like saying, how do I know where I can buy really good diamonds? So because you could get ripped off. I'm sure on eBay there's somebody selling diamonds right now, 5 for a tenner, you know. You'd be thinking 5 for a tenner, and then you'd be looking to see what his feedback was, you know. He's only got 3% people liking him. He's obviously ripped a lot of people off, you know. So you'd have to do a bit of research to try and find the genuine. So anyway, Rupa Goswami says, offer your respect in your mind, or dandavat, to those that are fully engaged in worshipping the deity. And to those who you feel you can really trust and are devoid of the propensity to criticize others. In other words, those who are only well-intentioned, they're so pure, they're on such an elevated level of consciousness that you're truly your ever well-wisher. Those are the ones that you open right up to. And it's the challenge for you to navigate and you know, and one of the ways, I mean, it's a slow way, but it's one of the surest ways to measure who's a Paramahamsa, is over a long period of time. Oh, I just met this person, he was amazing. There was a glow coming off him, and every time he said Hari Bol, all the ears stood on my neck, and he's so amazing. And but let's see now then over time, over a period of time, is the person steady? Is the person in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing? So then that means you have to be patient. If you want to find a Paramahamsa, then you're going to have to hang around for 10 years to be sure, you know, to be really sure. So you have to be patient as well. Yes, Gandaki Guru.
Only a Paramahamsa can identify another Paramahamsa. Yeah. It's like if you want to go to the doctor and you don't have any knowledge about medicine, any quack could be a good doctor for you, but only a good doctor could identify another good doctor. So it's the same in spiritual life. Only if you are a Paramahamsa, you can identify who is a Paramahamsa and who is a cheater or pretender.
And then if you have a group of Paramahamsas all saying that each other is Paramahamsas, then you can think, okay, well, they seem to know what they're talking about, so they're probably all Paramahamsas.
Yeah, this nice point that you made about doing things with understanding yesterday. Yes, it's appreciating, and that's the topic for the class. Yes. Sorry. So I just read about a point related to this yesterday. It's called circular causality, because you receive Bhaktilata Bija from spiritual master, and that is actually a transcendental knowledge and the methods how to practice it, so that awakens the devotion in your heart, and from that pushes you, you know, to perform devotional acts and infuses those acts with the devotion, and that infusion then brings more bhakti from the heart. So it's called a circular causality. And of course, in the beginning, the spiritual master has to be their guru, sadhu, they kind of pushing until you reach a point when it becomes like spontaneous. When they reach this you know, high platform of elevation, then it just flows, that energy. But still in initial stages, that awakening has to be there, that you cultivate the understanding and you practice it, and then our understanding grows and you do it with more understanding, and etc. And then opposite is true, you know, if you neglect the principle of hearing and chanting, then your activity starts becoming a bit mundane, it's that infusion of bhakti reduces. So therefore, until one reaches that spontaneous platform, it's so important to keep feeding the bhakti through hearing and chanting, association, and with the devotees, Guru Sada and Shastra.
Yeah, that's the challenge is can we involve other people, as many people? Can we bring them along? Can we make it attractive so that the young members of the community as well want to come along and are drawn in, because it's a very, it's a sweet experience. If we're relishing Krishna consciousness ourselves, then that will attract other people to want to relish the same thing also. So if you have a hierarchy of devotees, it should be that the longer the devotees have been in practicing Krishna consciousness, the more blissful they are, the more the higher they jump in kirtan. He must have been a devotee for 50 years. He just hit the ceiling. That's where it should be, if you're practicing, isn't it? And then the younger devotees, they become more convinced. They're thinking, wow, like you say, it's a secular causality. So they're thinking, well, the longer you do this, the better it gets, Until eventually you get to a point where you get free from the G-force, when you're going around the Earth on the orbit, and then suddenly they break free from G-force, and then they're gone, And then you would know that by, because generally when devotees are like that, they write books. They start writing books because they're aware of what's going on. And Shiv Ramaj was just saying in one class recently, last class actually, about Lord Chaitanya's travels, part 27, that Srila Prabhupada wanted us to read all the books of the Goswamis. They didn't write them for no reason. So the first books we read are Srila Prabhupada's, but then if we read Srila Prabhupada's books are telling us about the books written by the Goswamis for us to read also. So then that's the challenge. Indradhunan Swami he's in all the archives now, unearthing all these amazing treasures of knowledge that have been left by our previous acharyas, and then we're translating them and making them available for distribution. So that's the way the hierarchy works. As you become more and more through your secular causality, you start to get to the point where you really want to share what Krishna has given you, and so you want to see all these literatures become accessible, so that the devotees know so much more, And initially, when the devotees were first painting the paintings in Krishna book, you see that when Krishna's lifting Govardhan Hill, underneath Govardhan Hill, it's like lumps of rock and roots hanging out and beetles dropping down and things, and that's where it seemed like you just lift up Govardhan Hill, so there's going to be all like that, But I don't know which book it was now, but Shiv Ramaj is explaining in one of his books that when Govardhan Hill was lifted up, the underneath was like a peacock feather, and it kept expanding, till the residents underneath it were thinking the whole universe could get underneath here, And then the Sudarshan chakra was spinning around the edge, and it was like a fulgent circle. And that was because the water was right up, So, okay, you go into the hill, but then there's a tsunami of water and everyone drowns. So to keep the water back, the Sudarshan was spinning around. So in the early days, they just had like it was just a simple idea of what was going on. But then we find that the washerman was this person, that Kubja was this person, and they're all different personalities. Nobody just wanders into Krishna's pastimes by accident. There's always a story behind each particular individual, and then you realize, wow, this is multi-layered. There's all kinds of other things going on in it, We were just talking the other day about the Mahabharata Karna. So it turns out there was a previous life that Karna was in, and that's why, although it seems unfair now, there were things that he'd done in the past, which were why it was very difficult for him in the Mahabharata. So unless you're a Paramahamsa, so then when you start seeing devotees as more elevated, you can see devotees as being like flowers actually, and they have all petals around them, and all the petals are their good qualities. And if you see one petal and you think that petal doesn't seem so good, then remember that that's just one petal in amongst all the other good ones, and you can think, well, that devotee has this quality which I don't have. He's better than me there, and he has this quality. And okay, maybe I'm a little bit better at him at this, but there's so many other things that he's... And in that way, we're always able to remain appreciative of devotees. And that's definitely the best strategy for navigating our way through the community of devotees in any stage that we're in. It's just learning the ability to appreciate. And okay, maybe the devotee is not a Paramahamsa right now, but he's potentially a Paramahamsa because he's engaged in devotional service. Just like all the mangoes in this temple room right now are all mangoes. It's just some of them are juicier than others. But they're potentially all going to become ripened mangoes in due course of time. And you can get the mango and think, oh, this mango is useless. And you taste it and you throw it. No, just bear with it. That mango is going to go very sweet. It just takes time. Jai. Any other quick ones? Concluding comment.
So Pip's question about how do we become attached to Krishna, and Krishna says by obtaining knowledge about me, then you will attain transcendental love for me. So the more we learn about Krishna, the more we hear about him and his qualities and pastimes, then we'll become attached to him and develop love for him. So
we fall in love with Krishna. The more we know about him, the more we realize what a nice person he is, how wonderful he is, and the more we are able to fall in love with him, isn't it? Jai. Iskon Guru Vrinda ki. Jai. Bhagavad ki. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Jai. Open.
His Grace Adhoksaja Krishna Prabhu ki Jai. Jai.